Hello everyone, and welcome to a very special bargain bin review. Today we are doing my first double feature review. In honor of the upcoming release of 28 Years Later, which actually comes out today, I will be reviewing the first two movies, 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later. I've had these DVDs for over 15 years and apparently they're kind of rare to come by. And be forewarned, today's reviews are going to be full of spoilers, okay? So if you don't want to hear those, go ahead and mute the video now while you watch. I still need the views, by the way. So let's start with 28 Days Later, which released on June 23rd, 2003 in the United States. A man awakens from a coma 28 days after a virus has forced the evacuation of the UK. He connects with other survivors to persevere in this new and dangerous world of rage-filled zombies.
Rated R.
The movie opens up on a lab facility that is doing tests on chimpanzees. An animal rights group breaks in to free them. Is this some type of commentary on animal rights groups? The one and only other person in this entire lab is a single scientist who begs them to please not release these chimps because they have been infected with a new type of virus. Why is there only one person in this entire lab where a highly dangerous and contagious virus is being created? Who knows, but the chimps are released and everybody immediately gets infected. Now, this virus creates zombies, but not the slow, brain-eating zombies you may be used to. These are fast-running, rage-filled zombies. They don't seem to have any interest in eating people. Their only function seems to be committing acts of violence and vomiting blood on others. I thought this was a nice change for zombie films, though the virus still is spread through bodily fluids. And the characters in the movie know this, but none of them have any makeshift facial coverings. We see a single drop of blood fall from a dead body into a character's eye, and they transform into a rage zombie in under a minute. With something that potent, why isn't anybody wearing sunglasses? Plus, there were multiple times where other characters got blood all over their face, but I guess they just lucked out by not getting it in their mouth, nose, or eyes. The movie then switches to a completely nude Cillian Murphy in a hospital bed. I'm not exactly sure why he's naked in a hospital bed. I also don't know how his IV fluids lasted through this entire 28 days. But he gets up, gets dressed, and heads on out. The first thing that I noticed while watching 28 Days Later is how bad it actually looks. As I watched Cillian Murphy's character Jim walk around in now deserted London, I couldn't help but notice the strange orange tint that covered everything. Plus, there's a lot of quick cuts. And every shot is just so grainy. Now, I understand that this is a lower budget film, and probably a lot of the money that they got went towards shutting down the streets. And all of those quick cuts are probably from trying to piece together footage for when the streets were empty of traffic. I applaud director Danny Boyle for attempting to show us this empty city. There is still a sense of isolation in all of his shots, but they are not good-looking shots. It's basically just Jim saying hello in various locations throughout London. There's also a lot of artistic camera effects like picture-in-picture or slow wipes. I can see the artistic vision, but it was way overdone for me. Too much of a good thing. The orange tint does go away as the movie progresses, but the quick cuts do not. All of the action is a series of images flashing by quicker than you could ever comprehend. I'm sure this was done to kind of simulate what we would see if we were being attacked by a zombie, but with the grainy film, it's all really just a blur. The sound of the film was also a letdown. It was largely inconsistent throughout the film. I had to turn my TV louder than it's ever been just to hear the dialogue. There's also some discrepancies with how the zombies are attracted. Sometimes the characters whisper really quietly, or they do very loud actions, and the zombies are nowhere to be found. And other times, a horde is activated just by saying, hello? It's all very inconsistent. I blame it on the sound issues and the lack of zombie lore. I will say that Cillian Murphy did a good job with his character, Jim. He already has that naturally malnourished look about him. A lot of his emotion is more subtle than I was expecting, but he's good with expressing using only his face. His unbridled rage later in the movie was also refreshing, though I am surprised that he didn't have more questions about the situation he woke up into. We get a little bit of exposition from Mark and Selena after they rescue Jim, but it's not that much. And they don't even have a plan, other than just surviving. Like, they're not trying to get anywhere, like to a location that's deemed safe. 28 Days Later was deemed the most frightening movie since The Exorcist, and I just don't see it. While rage-filled zombies that run at top speed certainly is scary, there's just not enough of that in this movie. All of the zombie violence is quarantined to the quick cuts and shaky cam. It's not until our band of survivors meets a military squad where things get a little bit more scary. The The survivors were lured there by a radio broadcast that promised help and a cure. But of course, the military had different desires. They quickly pounced on the idea of having 2 women join the house. There is talk of sexual assault and other unsavory actions. Selena even gives Hannah, a child survivor, pills so she can make it through this type of experience. Luckily, none of that ever comes to fruition. Basically, the theme is that mankind is always going to be the most dangerous creature out there, which is often the theme of most zombie movies. Even Jim has an episode of violent rage, albeit without the virus. Zombies are predictable, we know their intentions. But humans are far more complicated. The zombies are more of a catalyst to move the characters around the country rather than an impending threat. Which doesn't make for a good zombie movie in my opinion. And that's pretty much the whole movie. Cillian Murphy does his job pretty well. The rest of the cast is pretty throwaway. They are all one-dimensional people. There's a really cringy line spoken by Selena, played by Naomi Harris, where she says that she and Jim are probably gonna fall in love in the apocalypse. And about 40 minutes later, they do. It felt like a tacked-on romance for no reason. Maybe the filmmakers wanted to give Jim a reason to come back to save her, but I think it would have been more in Jim's character to come back and save her just because he's a good person. Overall, 28 Days Later is a weird little film. I can see the vision that director Danny Boyle and writer Alex Garland had, but it's the execution that left me feeling underwhelmed. The bare bones plot is a pretty standard zombie-type film, marred by visual and sound issues. And that is why I'm giving 28 Days Later the rage-inducing score of 6 out of 10. Maybe it was more impressive 22 years ago. And before I move on to 28 Weeks Later, let's have a little intermission. Alright, now let's move to the sequel, 28 Weeks Later, which came out May 11, 2007. With order restored and the war against the infection won, the US Army steps in to help repatriate mainland Britain. One of the returning refugees carries a terrible secret that threatens to reignite the deadly explosion of bloodlust, carnage, and chaos.
Rated R.
28 Weeks Later happens, as you can guess, 28 weeks after the first movie. None of the main cast or creators of the first film returned for this one. The movie opens on a flashback sequence. We see spouses Don and Alice, played by Robert Carlyle and Catherine McCormick, holed up in a house with other survivors. They mention how they missed their kids who were on a school trip in Madrid when the outbreak occurred. Just then, a random child appears outside the door, begging to come in to hide from a horde of zombies. Alice forces them to let him in. This proves disastrous when the horde breaks through the windows and attacks everyone. In the battle, Don leaves his wife behind as she's grabbed by the zombies. Fast forward about 7 months and we see Don back in London, helping the US Army repatriate the city. All of the remaining rage zombies starve to death since they don't eat people. Crews are busy cleaning up all the biohazardous waste outside of the safe zone, which is on the Isle of Dogs. His children are finally allowed to come back from Madrid and they reunite at the train station. That reunion moment was sweet, but too short. Once back in the city, Don tells them a less than truthful story about how their mother died. I expected this to bring the whole family closer, but it didn't. The kids barely showed any emotion at all. Robert Carlyle was left to hold up that entire scene himself. And these kids, they pretty much gave you nothing throughout the whole film, aside from screaming on cue. Andy, the son, did have a really cool nightmare, but we never hear about it ever again. Plus, the very next day after reuniting with their father, who they haven't seen in 7 months, the kids break out of the safe zone to go back to their old house. Now you're probably asking yourself, how do they get out of this safe, militarized zone so easily? It's actually quite simple. They just walked off the bridge that leads out of town, but they made sure to walk behind the railings on the other side of the soldiers. A rooftop sniper named Doyle, played by Jeremy Renner, witnesses them escaping, but he doesn't sound the alarm. I guess because kids will be kids? Even though they could bring back a highly deadly virus that kills all of them. He does eventually call it in, but by then the kids have already traveled all around the city. The big surprise is what they find at their old house. And what do they find? Their mom, Alice! Somehow their mom was attacked by zombies and still made it all the way back to Center City, London. And again, the kids offer us nothing at what should be a miraculous reunion. Mom is transferred back to the safe zone under quarantine to be examined by Scarlett, the chief medical officer, played by Rose Byrne, and by Stone, the leader of the military contingent, played by Idris Elba. They discover that Mommy Dearest is in fact infected with the Rage virus, but she still has her conscience and self-control. It turns out that her heterochromia, her different colored eyes, is a mutation that doesn't allow the virus to fully take hold. Okay.
Huh?
It's also the same condition that her son Andy has. Naturally, the military says that she needs to be killed, and the doctor says that she needs to be studied for a possible cure. None of that really matters though, since Don allows his survivor guilt to overtake his common sense. So Don goes to visit his surviving wife, who he once left for dead. Somehow Don can walk through this highly secure facility with no resistance. No guards, no cameras, nothing to watch his miracle wife. They reconnect, he asks for forgiveness, and then they kiss. Which is weird in general because she's strapped to a table, but it's also weird because he doesn't know if she's infected or not. And as I mentioned earlier, the virus is transferred via bodily fluids. Her saliva infects Don, and he promptly jams both of his thumbs deep into her skull via her eyeballs and kills her. The rest of the movie unfolds in a traditional way. Don infects a soldier, the soldier does the same, and the next thing you know, you have a widespread infection. I will say that 28 Weeks Later did a better job than the first film at showing the ramifications of the virus. We see way more action this time around. The new director does try to emulate Danny Boyle's style, but in a more reserved way. The camera shots aren't as janky, and the cuts aren't as quick. There's more collateral damage, I mean citizens, to go through as well. Plus, the inclusion of the American military means there's guns galore. Have you ever seen helicopter rotors used as a form of crowd control? You will here, and it's a cool scene, but very unrealistic. Unfortunately, the US military is unable to contain the outbreak, and they switch to a scorched earth policy, quite literally. I mean, it's not the first time the US government has firebombed entire communities. In all of this confusion, we see Scarlet, the chief medical officer, expertly dispose of a zombie that's trying to attack the kids. This was a cool scene that showed how strong she was and how dedicated she was to protect the children. Regrettably, after that, Scarlet somehow lost all of her military training and became a damsel in distress for Doyle to save. The survivors move from location to location, fighting zombies and avoiding the military. Most of them die and Andy gets bitten. But remember, he has the same genetic mutation as his mommy, so therefore he is now a carrier of the virus. Which brings us to the ending of the movie, which was super lackluster. The kids take a helicopter ride and I guess it crashes? We don't actually know. And then we see some zombie silhouettes running towards the Eiffel Tower, and that's it. I assume that Andy somehow infected somebody else? I hope this is addressed in the third movie. While 28 Weeks Later certainly looks better than its predecessor, it still suffers from the same tropes from typical zombie movies. The bigger budget allows for more action and special effects. The city feels even more empty this time around, and all the added gore was a welcome addition to me. But the acting was a step down, leaving Robert Carlyle to carry the entire film. The premise of a possible cure is thrown right out the window as quickly as it appeared. And that is why I'm giving 28 Weeks Later the lazy score of 5.5 out of 10. The commercialization of the series proved to be more action-oriented, but less substantive. And herein lies the problem. I have heard so many amazing reviews about this series, especially the first movie. And after watching them, I feel like I may have missed the memo. It could be that I'm watching them decades after their original releases. Maybe they don't hold up as well without nostalgia goggles. It does make me curious about the third installment, 28 Years Later, which comes out June 20th, which is actually today. Will it be more like the first movie or the second one? Or will it be something completely different? Director Danny Boyle and writer Alex Garland are returning for this third iteration, but that doesn't really mean much.
Burn.
So what do you think? The 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later blow your mind? Or are you looking forward to 28 Years Later? Or are you still upset that there's no 28 months later? Let me know in the comments down below. And please like and subscribe to keep my rage at bay. Thanks for watching, and I will be back with a review of 28 Years Later once I finally see it. 99 and don't let the zombies bite.